Good morning, Vista Buddhist Sangha. So nice to be here to celebrate Bodhi Day and Osebo with you. I recall I was here last year. Does anyone remember that?
Yeah.
You do? Darn, I can't use the same Dharma talk. I was going to. Driving down, it was unusual because every time I've come down here, it's been blue sky and sunny. And today it rained. I thought it never rained in Vista. Anyway, we came in our new car. Well, it's 1 year old, but it's Alice's car. And she said, if I'm coming to Vista with you, we're gonna take Rosie. She named the car. It's a beautiful red Mazda CX-3. And she said, well, it's good it's raining because now you get to learn how to use the windshield wipers. I have an old Ford Ranger truck, about 12 years old, and I don't have all the fancy knobs and gadgets in my truck. So, and she drives the car 95% of the time. So when she lets me drive it, you know, I'm like a kid in a candy store. What's this? What's this? What's going on? I thought for our service today that rather than come up with something brand new, I would talk about things that I've talked about this year. I'm not going to review the whole year, but it's pretty incredible that here we are in December 8th. A whole year has gone by. And I always take stock of myself at the end of the year. What have I learned on the path of Buddhism, my personal path? Being a minister assistant kind of forces me to teach myself things that I would normally not be aware of or even appreciate. But then when I think about it and I say, yeah, that's right, the very next moment I forget about it. And that's the human condition. We go back and forth. When Shakyamuni realized the root of suffering, it wasn't that he became aware of a method that would eliminate suffering. Suffering is part of life. And what we're trying to eliminate is our attachment to wanting suffering to go away. And so we gather together as a Sangha and we listen to the Dharma, and I hope I have some good Dharma points for you this morning. I'm going to start with a pencil, a simple pencil. What can we learn from a simple pencil? What do you think? Impermanence? Sure. And it has an eraser, so it can erase mistakes. I want to read something to you that came in my inbox quite a while ago, and I've shared it with you before. And if you remember it, it's always good to hear it again. It's about a pencil maker. And he told his pencil that he had just created 5 important lessons just before putting that pencil in the box. Number 1, first lesson, number 1. Everything you do will always leave a mark. Number 2, you can always correct the mistakes you make. Number 3, what is important is what is inside of you. And number 4, in life you will undergo painful sharpenings, which will only make you a better person, or in this case, a better pencil. And the last one, number 5, to be the best pencil, you must allow yourself to be held and guided by the hand that holds you. Those 5 points kind of sum up for me a good portion of what I've learned this year from my studies of Buddhism. Another book that came into our lives from a friend of ours, a friend of Alice's. It's become her favorite Buddhist book. We all love bunnies, and this is called Bunny Buddhism, Hopping Along the Path to Enlightenment. And it's a cute book. It's full of marvelous sayings that teach the Dharma in just 2 sentences. Let me give you some examples. I asked Alice for her favorite bunny wisdoms, and she came up with these. So this is from Alice. May we all hop in kindness, for kind hops benefit all beings. Her next one was, a bunny who refuses to face the dark will never see the stars. And her third and last one, the wise bunny knows even a blade of grass is a wonder when he really takes time to notice it. To me, those are words full of Buddhist wisdom, coming from probably a non-Buddhist person. And here I've been playing with the Dharma and playing with books for the last, how many years? 15 years or so. I could never come up with this. So I challenged myself to find my own favorites, and so here are a couple of them. The wise bunny knows we rarely see things as they are. We see them as we believe them to be. A potato is a potato, no matter how much I want it to be a carrot, says the bunny. My interpretation of that is, an empty bottle of wine is an empty bottle of wine, no matter how much I want it to be a full bottle of wine. Our granddaughter, who lives just outside of Paris, France, she wrote this when she was 13. She just turned 14. And she's had a fairly rough life, losing her father when she was only 5 or 6 to cancer. And Alice has been corresponding via email with her pretty much every other day. And it takes Alice hours and hours to write her email, and it takes Elena like that, and she's got a response back. So Alice has to sit down and crunch away again for another hour or so. And they've been sharing, Alice shares her bunny wisdoms with Elena via email. And Elena said, I love those bunny wisdoms, and here's one I wrote myself. So from the mind of at the time, 13-year-old teenager. A bunny can only be a wise bunny when it is open to hopping into the curiosity of the unknown. Isn't that kind of like what we feel when we come to a Buddhist temple for the first time and we take that first step onto the path of Buddhism? And as Ross was saying, things can be great one moment, and then you get a phone call, and the next moment, they're not great. And that is what the Buddha was describing in his Four Noble Truths and his Eightfold Path. So, Bodhi Day. Actually, December 8th, which is today, is the recognized calendar day to celebrate Bodhi Day by Buddhists the world over. Supposedly, Bodhi Day was recognized in 596 BC. That is when the Buddha, the historical Buddha, awakened to the truth of impermanence and suffering. Bodhi is a Sanskrit word. And it's a spiritual awakening and freedom from the cycles of life. That is what the word is trying to express. And as Ross showed us, it's also the name of a ficus tree under which Shakyamuni sat, meditated, and achieved enlightenment. Bodhi Day basically is recognized as the beginning of Buddhism. And just exactly what is this beginning of Buddhism? I hope I can say it quite simply, because it's very difficult to achieve. It's very complex to understand that suffering will be with us till we physically leave this world, and that we have to find a way to accept suffering. Kind of a paradox. So Shakyamuni discovered that the root of suffering is ignorance, and in ignorance is greed, anger, and stupidity. And we label it gas, G-A-S. And we all have lots of gas. And where do we assign blame for our temptations? Our greed and our anger and our stupidity. Always outside ourselves. Never from internal. Never from inside ourselves. And this, believe it or not, was Siddhartha's realization. And when he realized that he was the source of all his temptations, then duality was transcended, and he awakened to the truth that the root of all suffering was inside his mind, inside his being. And as his own mind was the root of all the temptations, so was he the one to master, or at least control, those temptations. He saw the truth of the reality of life, and that is the beginning of Buddhism. To see the truth of the reality of life as it is, not how we want it to be, but as it is. So Bodhi Day is our invitation, our opportunity to reaffirm our dedication to the three distinguishing features of the Buddhist worldview. Do you know what they are? There are three distinguishing universal features of the worldview of all Buddhists. Wisdom, compassion, and kindness. And it is no surprise to me that Buddhism is enjoying a sort of a renaissance or a revival at a time when our culture, our society, and our planet needs kindness and compassion and wisdom more than ever. So how should I reassess the traditional story of Siddhartha in the light of 21st century sensibilities? Well, perhaps one way is to identify how he identified as a man in a historically male-dominated religion. And of course, we've come a long way from the male-dominated culture of Shakyamuni's time, at least in Jodo Shinshu, where we have women minister assistants and women ministers. Or another way might be with his intention. You've all heard the Eightfold Path. What is the first step in the Eightfold Path? What is it called?
Right view.
Right view. Or right intention. Same meaning. And what does that mean? It means to keep free of prejudice and superstition and to see the true nature of life. And perhaps another trait might be his humility. Humility is a very, very big word in Buddhism. It's a super big word in Jodo Shinshu. And it's a word that a meaning that I struggle with daily. how to maintain my humility, because my ego can take over in a flash. And then I have to come back to separating myself from whatever emotion is bothering me. It's a constant challenge. But can you imagine Siddhartha, the Siddhartha, if he was here today, going on talk shows or attracting large numbers of Facebook or Twitter followers or whatever else is hot on social media? I don't do social media. That screen is not for me, by the way. I'm still the low-tech guy here. Can you imagine him publishing books and presiding over spiritual centers and throngs of rap followers? Some of the spiritual leaders of today do exactly that. But Siddhartha was not like that. He lived as a homeless monk, walking from village to village, devoting his life's energies to easing the suffering of others. He lived a life of humility, and the most difficult of all spiritual virtues to inhabit and sustain, believe me, is humility. So embracing the light and the wisdom of humility and kindness and compassion, to me, that is the timeless inspiration and significance for Bodhi Day. For the suffering of humanity and its roots persists as it did in Siddhartha's time, and the question still remains: how to overcome greed, how to overcome anger, how to overcome stupidity, how to overcome prejudice, and create instead a truly kind and compassionate society. So what should be mine and what should be your response, your authentic response to the world's pain as it exists today? If we embrace humility, then kindness and compassion will naturally follow. I'd like to close with a Japanese proverb. It's one of my favorites that helps me to maintain my balance and my perspective on my ego versus my humility. The more ripe a cluster of rice becomes, the lower it bows down its head. And when I was in training as a minister assistant, Reverend Alan Sakamoto, who was my primary teacher, told me that when we gasho, think of a bowl on top of your head. And when you gasho and bow, you're emptying that ego bowl. That bowl is full of ego. Gasho, bow, dump your ego. Please join me in gasho. Namo Amida. Namo Amida. Namanda.